"You're not really my equal, Melissa. You never were." Those words, spoken by my husband of 34 years to his business partner over bourbon and cigars in our living room, shattered me in ways I'm still learning to describe. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where all good tragedies begin, with the illusion of happiness. My name is Melissa Bennett. I'm 63 years old, and until that October evening, I believed I had built the perfect life. The morning of the dinner party, I woke at 5:30 a.m. as I had for 3 decades. The house was still dark, the early autumn chill seeping through the windows of our Pasadena estate. I slipped out of bed carefully so as not to wake Dylan. He needed his sleep. A big deal was closing a $10 million architectural contract that would cement Bennett and Associates as the premier firm in Southern California. In the kitchen, I moved through my routine with the precision of a ballet I'd performed thousands of times. French press coffee for Dylan, 3 scoops exactly. Sliced mango and Greek yogurt for his breakfast. The financial section of the Los Angeles Times folded at his place, setting next to the fresh orange juice I'd squeezed by hand because he could taste the difference. I caught my reflection in the stainless steel refrigerator. 63 years old. My hair, once a rich chestnut brown, had faded to a mousy gray that I kept pulled back in a practical bun. The lines around my eyes had deepened into permanent grooves, and my hands told the real story. Knuckles swollen from arthritis, skin thin as paper, spotted with age. These were hands that had typed countless business proposals for Dylan before he could afford a secretary. Hands that had changed diapers, packed lunches, scrubbed floors, and applauded at every school play and graduation. "Morning, Mom." I turned to find our daughter Emma standing in the doorway, already dressed in her lawyer's armor, a tailored charcoal suit, her dark hair in a severe ponytail. At 32, she was everything I'd once dreamed of becoming. Harvard Law, a corner office at Morrison & Price, a salary that made my head spin. "Coffee," I offered. "I'll grab something at the office." She pulled her phone from her purse, already scrolling. "Just wanted to remind you I can't make it tonight. Big deposition prep." Something tightened in my chest. "Emma, I've been planning this dinner for weeks. Your father specifically wanted Dad will understand." She didn't look up from her screen. "Business comes first. You taught me that." "Did I wanted to ask, or did you learn it from watching your father walk past me for 34 years? But I didn't say it. I never said the things that mattered." "Jacob will be there at least," I said quietly. Emma's laugh was sharp, brittle. "Jacob, Mom, he works for Dad. He's basically required to show up." She finally looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes that made me feel small. "You don't really get how any of this works, do you?" She was gone before I could answer, the click of her heels fading into the morning silence. I stood there for a long moment, Dylan's coffee growing cold in my hands. Through the kitchen window, I could see the garden I'd planted 20 years ago, the roses I'd pruned every spring, the fountain Dylan had allowed me to install for our anniversary, our 15th 20th. The years blurred together, now measured in dinner parties and country club events and charity galas, where I smiled and nodded and made sure Dylan's glass was never empty. The memory came unbidden, sharp as broken glass, June 1990. The courthouse steps. Dylan in his father's suit, me in a cream-colored dress from Macy's. I was 29 years old, 3 credits shy of my business degree at USC, pregnant with Emma, and terrified. "I'll take care of you," Dylan had whispered, his hand warm on my swollen belly. "You and our baby. You'll never have to worry about anything. You'll be my queen, Melissa. My queen." My father stood apart from the small gathering, his painter's whites still speckled with dried latex from the morning's job. Thomas Wright, a man who'd spent 50 years painting other people's houses, who smelled of turpentine and honest sweat. He'd pulled me aside before the ceremony. "You sure about this, Mel?" His calloused hand had cupped my cheek. "You got a good brain. You could finish school. Get that degree." "I love him, Daddy." "I know you do, sweetheart." His eyes had been sad, knowing. "Just remember, you always got a home with me. Always." I'd kissed his weathered cheek and promised I'd be fine. I'd be more than fine. I'd be a queen. The coffee pot beeped, jolting me back to the present. Dylan would be up soon, expecting his breakfast, his paper, his perfectly ordered morning. I had canapes to prepare, wine to chill, a crown rib roast to season. 20 guests were coming to celebrate his triumph, and I would make sure everything was flawless. Because that's what I did. That's who I was. Dylan's footsteps on the stairs. I pasted on my smile the one that had become as much a part of my uniform as the apron I wore, and turned to greet my husband. "Morning, darling," I said, and the word tasted like ashes in my mouth. By 6 p.m., the house gleamed. Crystal glasses sparkled under the chandelier. The table was set with our wedding china Wedgwood, a pattern called colonnade, that Dylan's mother had chosen. White roses, his favorite, spilled from silver vases. The roast rested on the counter, pink and perfect, exactly as he liked it. I'd changed into the dress Dylan had bought me for occasions like this, navy blue conservative, with a modest neckline that drew no attention. My jewelry was simple pearl earrings, my wedding ring, a thin gold bracelet Dylan had given me 5 years ago. Or was it 10? They all looked the same. Dylan appeared at 6:15 freshly showered, wearing the Tom Ford suit I'd picked up from the dry cleaners that morning. At 65, he was still handsome in that weathered, distinguished way that society rewarded in men and punished in women. Silver at the temples. A jawline kept sharp by twice-weekly sessions with his personal trainer. The kind of man who looked at home in boardrooms and country clubs. He didn't look at me. He never really looked at me anymore. "Everything ready?" he asked, adjusting his cufflinks. "Of course." "Robert's bringing his new girlfriend. Keep her wine glass full, she's the daughter of the planning commissioner." His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, smiled slightly. "And Ashley will be here. I need you to make sure she feels included. She's nervous about meeting everyone." Ashley, Dylan's administrative assistant. 28 years old, with the kind of effortless beauty I'd never possessed even in my youth. She'd been working for Dylan for 18 months, and I'd pretended not to notice the way his voice softened when he said her name. "Of course," I repeated. The doorbell rang. Dylan strode past me, trailing his cologne, something expensive I'd bought him for Christmas, though I couldn't remember which year. I followed him to the foyer, ready to begin my performance. The evening blurred into the familiar choreography. I took coats. I offered drinks. I laughed at jokes I'd heard a dozen times before. I made sure the canapes circulated, the wine flowed, and Dylan's success was celebrated with appropriate enthusiasm. Ashley Morgan arrived at 7:30 wearing a red dress that clung to her curves like paint. She had that fresh, dewy look of youth skin that hadn't yet learned to sag eyes, that hadn't yet learned to hide disappointment. I watched Dylan's face light up when she entered, and something inside me cracked just a little bit more. "Melissa, this is Ashley," Dylan said, not meeting my eyes. "She's been invaluable to the business." "How nice to meet you properly," I lied, extending my hand. Up close, I could see the diamond studs in her ears, larger than mine, newer, shinier. A gift, I wondered. "From whom, Mrs. Bennet?" Ashley said, her smile bright and empty. "What a beautiful home. You must be so proud." "I built it," I wanted to say. "I picked every curtain, planted every flower, chose every piece of furniture. I turned a shell into a home while you were in elementary school." "Thank you, dear," I said instead. "Can I get you some wine?" Dinner was served at 8. I'd prepared Dylan's favorite menu endive salad, with pear and roquefort, the crown roast with rosemary potatoes, green beans almondine, and for dessert a chocolate torte I'd spent 4 hours perfecting. As I brought out each course, the conversation swirled around me. Mergers, acquisitions, zoning codes, profit margins. I was a ghost in my own dining room, visible only when someone needed a water glass refilled. Jacob arrived late, slipping in during the salad course. Our son, 29 years old already, a mid-level manager at Bennett & Associates, riding his father's coattails toward a success he hadn't earned. He kissed my cheek perfunctorily and took his seat next to Dylan, immediately launching into shop talk. Neither of my children asked about me. Neither of them ever did. By 10 p.m., the dinner had migrated to the living room. Cigars for the men, after dinner drinks for everyone. I moved through the room like a waitress, clearing glasses, offering refills, invisible in my navy dress. That's when it happened. I'd gone to the kitchen to open another bottle of port. The door swung shut behind me, muffling the conversation. But not enough. Not nearly enough. Through the gap where the door hadn't quite latched, I heard Dylan's voice thick with bourbon and triumph. "Honestly, Robert, I've put up with enough. Melissa, she's a nice woman, don't get me wrong, but she's completely out of her depth. Look at her, she can't even hold a conversation with clients without making them uncomfortable." My hand froze on the bottle. The kitchen spun. "So what's your plan?" Robert's voice. Dylan's best friend since college. A man I'd cooked dinner for hundreds of times. "I'll wait until after my 65th birthday next year. Emma's established. Jacob settled. After that, freedom. A pause. Then Robert's laughter, low and knowing. Ashley. She gets me, Robert. She's young, vibrant, alive. Not some dowdy housewife who only knows how to cook and complain. The bottle slipped from my fingers. I caught it just before it hit the floor, my hands shaking so violently I had to set it down on the counter. 34 years. 34 years of waking before dawn to make his coffee, of putting my education on hold, of raising his children, of organizing his life, managing his household, playing hostess to his friends and clients, of making myself small so he could be big, of swallowing my opinions, my dreams, myself. And in 2 minutes and a handful of careless words spoken over cigars and bourbon, it all meant nothing. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was weightless, as if the gravity that had held me in orbit around Dylan for 3 decades had suddenly switched off, and I was floating in a void. My reflection stared back at me from the dark window over the sink. An old woman, a stranger, wearing pearls and navy blue and a smile that had calcified into a mask. I remembered another version of myself, dancing barefoot in the rain at a college party, Dylan spinning me around, both of us laughing, arguing passionately in my economics class about market equilibrium, staying up all night to finish my thesis on women in business leadership, a thesis I'd never completed because Emma came early and Dylan needed me more than I needed a degree. When had I stopped being Melissa Wright and become Mrs. Dylan Bennett? When had I agreed to disappear? The kitchen door swung open. Ashley stood there, her red dress vivid against the neutral tones of my kitchen. "Oh, Mrs. Bennett, I was just looking for the powder room." I looked at her, really looked at her. She was younger than my children, young enough to be my granddaughter. And Dylan had chosen her, was choosing her, had already decided on a future where I didn't exist. "Down the hall, second door on the left," I heard myself say. My voice sounded normal, steady. "How was that possible?" "Thank you." She hesitated. "Are you okay?" "You look a little pale." "I'm fine," I lied. One more lie in a lifetime of lies. "Just tired." She nodded and left. I stood there alone in my kitchen and felt the first spark of something that wasn't sadness or shock. It was rage. Pure, clean, clarifying rage. I picked up the bottle of port, poured it into the crystal decanter with hands that had stopped shaking, and carried it into the living room. The men looked up as I entered. Dylan Robert James Thornton from the Planning Commission, Marcus Way from the bank. They fell silent like children caught doing something forbidden. "Your port," I said, setting the decanter on the coffee table. Dylan's eyes met mine for the first time all evening. I saw him calculating, wondering if I'd heard, deciding I couldn't have his Melissa, would never have held her tongue if she'd heard those words. "Thank you, darling," he said, and turned back to his guests. I walked out of the room, walked down the hall, walked into our bedroom, and quietly, methodically began to pack a bag. My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend Sarah Martinez, the only person from my college days I'd stayed in touch with. "How's the party? Tell Dylan congrats on the deal." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed, "Can I stay with you tonight?" The reply came immediately. "Always." "What happened? I'll tell you when I get there." I finished packing, changed out of the navy dress into jeans and a sweater, clothes I'd worn to run errands, to grocery shop, to be invisible. I looked at my wedding ring. 34 years. I slid it off my finger and placed it on Dylan's nightstand next to his watch and wallet. Then I walked back downstairs. The party was still going. Laughter spilled from the living room. I could see Dylan through the doorway, gesturing with his cigar king of his castle. Ashley sat on the arm of his chair, smiling. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't make a scene. I simply walked out the front door, got into my 10-year-old Honda Civic, the car Dylan said was perfectly adequate for errands, and drove away from my life. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. The same old woman looked back at me, but her eyes were different. They were awake. Sarah's apartment was in Silver Lake, a bohemian neighborhood Dylan had always dismissed as too artsy, too poor. She lived on the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse, surrounded by books and plants, and the kind of beautiful chaos that came from actually living rather than just existing. She opened the door in her pajamas, flannel pants covered in cats, a USC t-shirt from our sophomore year. At 61, Sarah looked exactly like herself. Gray hair cropped short, laugh lines around her eyes. No makeup, no pretense. She took one look at my face and pulled me inside. Wine or tea? She asked. Tea. My voice sounded strange, hollow. I need to be clear-headed. We sat in her kitchen while the kettle boiled. Outside Los Angeles glittered in the darkness. Sarah didn't ask questions. She just waited, her hands wrapped around her mug, her presence solid and real and safe. Dylan's having an affair, I said finally, with his assistant, and he's planning to divorce me next year. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she didn't look surprised. How did you find out? I told her. All of it. The overheard conversation, the casual cruelty, the way he'd dismissed our entire marriage as something to put up with. When I finished, Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. What are you going to do? I don't know. The admission felt like failure. 34 years as Mrs. Dylan Bennett and I didn't know how to be anything else. I don't have a degree. I haven't worked since before Emma was born. Everything's in his name. The house, the cars, the bank accounts. I have my own checking account for household expenses, but that's it. What about your dad? Didn't he? She stopped. We both knew my father had died 5 years ago. Thomas Wright, who'd spent 50 years painting houses, who'd smelled of turpentine and truth, who'd warned me about Dylan and I, hadn't listened. Suddenly I remembered. The letter. The one from his lawyer that had arrived a week after the funeral. I'd been so consumed with grief with Dylan telling me what to feel and when to feel it that I'd tucked it away in my nightstand drawer and never opened it. Sarah, I said slowly, can I borrow your laptop? I spent Saturday morning in Sarah's spare room surrounded by paper. The letter from my father's lawyer, bank statements, property records, and slowly and possibly a picture emerged that made my breath catch. My father, Thomas Wright, the house painter who drove a 15-year-old truck and wore the same flannel shirts until they fell apart, had been a millionaire. Not through salary, through patience, through 50 years of buying distressed properties with cash, fixing them up with his own hands and renting them out. Through understanding that compound interest and property appreciation could turn small investments into empires if you were willing to wait. The inventory was staggering. A 4-bedroom craftsman in Pasadena estimated value $1.2 million. 2 rental properties in Echo Park combined value $900,000. A commercial building in downtown LA, $1.5 million. 3 vacant lots in Santa Monica, $800,000. And the house he'd lived in, the house I'd grown up in, now worth $1.3 million. Total $5.7 million. All of it left to me, not to Dylan. To me, Melissa Wright Bennett. My father had made sure of that. In the folder was a handwritten letter dated the week before his death. Dear Mel, if you're reading this, I'm gone. That's okay. I had a good life and I got to see my girl grow up even if I didn't always agree with the choices you made. You're probably surprised about the properties. I never told you because I wanted to see what kind of man Dylan really was. I figured if he really loved you, he wouldn't care what your old man had in the bank. He wouldn't ask. And you know what? He never did ask. Not once in 34 years. I want you to think about what that means, Mel. He never wondered if you had something of your own. He never asked if you needed anything. He just assumed you were his to take care of like a child or a pet. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's a good man and I'm just a stubborn old fool. But I want you to have something that's yours. Something he can't touch. Something that reminds you that you're Melissa Wright, not just Mrs. Dylan Bennett. Don't tell him right away. Watch. See how he treats you when he thinks you have nothing. That'll show you who he really is. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Always have been. Don't let anyone make you forget who you are. Love, Dad. I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face. My father had known. For 34 years he'd known, and he'd been trying to protect me even from beyond the grave. I'd been so ashamed of him. Ashamed of his paint-stained clothes at my wedding. Ashamed when Dylan's friends asked what my father did, and I had to say house painter instead of architect or lawyer or any of the acceptable professions. I'd kept him at arm's length, made excuses when he wanted to visit, let months go by between phone calls, and all along he'd been building me a safety net I didn't even know I needed. Oh, Daddy, I whispered to the empty room. I'm so sorry. Sarah found me there an hour later, surrounded by paper and tears. Mel, what's wrong? I handed her the letter, watched her read it, saw her eyes widen. Holy shit, she breathed. Melissa, do you know what this means? It means my father was smarter than I ever gave him credit for. It means you have leverage. Sarah's mind was already racing. She was a sociology professor at UCLA, brilliant and strategic. Dylan doesn't know about this, right? No, I never opened the letter. I thought it was just paperwork about the funeral. Good. Don't tell him. Not yet. She pulled out her phone. I know a divorce lawyer, Catherine Park. She's tough, smart, and she doesn't take shit from anyone. Let me call her. Sarah, it's Saturday. Catherine owes me a favor. I was an expert witness in one of her cases last year. She was already dialing. Trust me. Monday morning I sat across from Catherine Park in her downtown office. She was 45, Korean-American with the kind of sharp intelligence that radiated from her like heat. Her office walls were covered with framed cases she'd won, mostly women, mostly fighting powerful men for what they were owed. Tell me everything, she said. And I mean everything. Don't leave anything out because you're embarrassed or ashamed. I've heard it all. So I told her. The 34 years, the overheard conversation, the affair with Ashley, my father's properties. By the time I finished, she was making notes on her legal pad, her expression unreadable. Okay, she said finally. Here's the situation. California is a community property state, which means anything acquired during the marriage gets split 50-50. But in this is important property you inherit is separate property. It stays yours. Dylan has no claim to your father's estate. Relief washed over me. So he can't touch it. Not legally. But Melissa, there's a bigger picture here. She leaned forward. From what you're telling me, Dylan has been moving money. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, that's not normal business practice. That's someone preparing to hide assets before a divorce. My stomach dropped. How long has he been planning this? Based on what you've described, at least 3 years. Maybe longer. She pulled out a business card. I'm going to refer you to Linda Wu. She's a forensic accountant. She hunts down hidden money for a living. We're going to need her to build a case. A case? Melissa, Dylan isn't just cheating on you emotionally. He's committing financial fraud. If we can prove he's been hiding marital assets with the intent to deprive you of your share in a divorce, the court can order him to pay you damages. We're talking triple the amount he tried to hide. The room seemed to tilt. How much are we talking about? I won't know until Linda does her work, but based on what you've told me about his business, we're easily talking millions. Catherine's eyes were fierce. But here's what I need you to understand. This is going to be a long process. 6 months, maybe a year. And during that time, you're going to have to be patient. You're going to have to pretend. Pretend you don't know about the affair. Pretend you're still the dutiful wife. Because the moment Dylan knows you're onto him, he'll start covering his tracks. We need to catch him with his hands in the cookie jar. I thought about going back to that house, cooking Dylan's breakfast, sleeping next to him, pretending I hadn't heard him dismiss our marriage as something to put up with. I don't know if I can do that. Catherine's expression softened. I know it's hard, but Melissa, you've spent 34 years taking care of everyone else. For once, take care of yourself. Be strategic. Be smart. And when the time is right, we're going to make sure you get everything you're owed. I left her office with a folder full of documents and a knot of determination in my stomach. On the drive back to Pasadena, I made a detour. My father's house stood on a quiet street in Alhambra. I'd sold it after the funeral, or rather I'd let Dylan sell it. He'd hired a realtor, negotiated the price, handled the paperwork. I'd signed where he told me to sign, numb with grief, while he'd deposited the check into our joint account. Except now I knew the house had never been in our joint account. It had been mine, my separate property, and Dylan had known it had taken advantage of my grief to claim what wasn't his. I sat in my car staring at the small craftsman where I'd grown up. New owners had painted it gray and planted roses in the front yard. My father's roses, the ones he'd tended every Sunday morning, were gone. I thought about all the Sunday mornings I'd missed because Dylan had brunch plans or golf games or networking events that couldn't be rescheduled. All the times my father had called and I'd let it go to voicemail because I was too busy being Mrs. Dylan Bennett. I'm sorry, Daddy, I whispered, but I'm going to make this right. I promise. My phone buzzed. A text from Dylan. Where are you? I need you to pick up my suits from the dry cleaner. And we're out of coffee. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back, I'll be home soon. But as I started the car, I made myself a promise I would go back. I would smile, I would cook his meals and pick up his dry cleaning and pour his coffee. But I would never ever be Mrs. Dylan Bennett again. I was Melissa Wright, and I was done disappearing. The next 6 months were the strangest of my life. By day, I was the perfect wife. By night, I was building a case that would destroy the man I'd spent 34 years serving. It started small. Catherine connected me with Linda Wu, the forensic accountant. Linda was 50 Chinese American with the kind of methodical precision that came from years working for the FBI. We met at coffee shops, libraries, anywhere Dylan wouldn't think to look. Financial fraud leaves footprints, Linda explained at our first meeting, spreading documents across a Starbucks table. People think they're being clever, but money has to go somewhere. It has to come from somewhere. I just follow the trail. She taught me what to look for. Statements from accounts I didn't know existed. Transfers to shell companies with names like Pacific Development LLC and Westside Holdings Group. Receipts for expenses I'd never seen, a $3,500 monthly payment to a luxury apartment in Century City. That's where she lives, Linda said, pointing to the address. Ashley Morgan. He's been paying her rent for 18 months. I felt nothing. That was the strangest part. I'd expected to feel hurt, betrayed, devastated. Instead, I felt cold, clinical, like I was researching someone else's marriage. What else, I asked. Linda pulled out more papers. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Total deposits over the last 3 years, $1.8 million. Transferred through 5 different shell companies to make it harder to trace. Can you prove it? I already did. She smiled grimly. I have bank statements, wire transfer records, corporate filings. He was careful, but not careful enough. Nobody ever is. Every Tuesday and Thursday I met with Linda. She'd hand me folders of evidence and I'd take them to Catherine, who was building what she called the nuclear option. When we file for divorce, Catherine explained, we're not just asking for a 50-50 split. We're asking for damages. Reimbursement for the 34 years you spent building his career while he hid assets. Compensation for emotional distress. And we're asking for triple the amount he tried to hide as punitive damages. How much? I asked. She showed me the spreadsheet. The number made my hands shake. $3.2 million. Plus my father's properties. Plus alimony. Melissa, Catherine said gently, when this is over, you're going to be a very wealthy woman. But you have to be patient. Can you do that? I thought about Dylan sitting across the breakfast table from me that morning, reading his paper while I poured his coffee. He hadn't even looked up, hadn't said thank you. 34 years and he'd never said thank you. Yes, I said. I can be patient. At home, I played my part. I cooked Dylan's favorite meals. I organized his schedule. I smiled at his jokes. I even had dinner with Ashley once when Dylan suggested we get to know each other better. We met at a trendy restaurant in Beverly Hills. Ashley arrived in a Gucci dress I knew Dylan had bought. I'd seen the charge on his credit card statement. She was nervous, playing with her napkin, ordering a salad she barely touched. Mrs. Bennett, she said, I just want you to know I really respect what you and Mr. Bennett have built, the business, your family. It's inspiring. I looked at her across the table. 28 years old, the same age I'd been when I dropped out of college to marry Dylan. She had no idea she was just another version of me, younger, shinier, destined to be replaced when someone younger and shinier came along. Call me Melissa, I said. And thank you. It took a lot of sacrifice to build what we have. I can imagine. No, I thought you really can't. I reached across the table and took her hand. She looked startled. Ashley, I said gently, let me give you some advice. Don't ever give up your career for a man. Don't ever let someone convince you that their dreams are more important than yours. And don't ever think that being young and beautiful will protect you forever. It won't. She pulled her hand back, confused. Thank you. I paid for lunch. Dylan never even asked how it went. But the hardest part wasn't fooling Dylan. It was watching my children. Emma came for Sunday brunch one week in March. She sat at our dining room table, scrolling through her phone while I served quiche and fresh fruit. Mom, she said without looking up, Dad mentioned you've been acting strange lately. Are you okay? Strange how? I don't know. Distracted. He said you forgot to pick up his suits twice last week. I had. On purpose. Both times I'd been meeting with Linda, gathering evidence of Dylan's offshore accounts. I've just been tired. I lied. Emma finally looked at me, really looked at me, and for a moment I thought I saw something crack in her professional facade, something that looked like concern. "Mom, if you're having problems." "I'm fine, Emma." "You should talk to someone. Dad's been really stressed about work. He doesn't need what?" The words came out sharper than I intended. "He doesn't need me to have feelings. He doesn't need me to take up space in his perfect life." Emma's eyes widened. I know exactly what you meant." I set down my coffee cup very carefully. "I'm sorry I'm not as efficient as his office staff. I'm sorry I occasionally forget to be invisible." "Mom!" But I was already walking away, my hands shaking rage bubbling up from somewhere deep and ancient. I locked myself in the bathroom and ran cold water over my wrists until I could breathe again. When I came out, Emma was gone. She'd left a note on the counter. "Mom, I'm sorry if I upset you. Please call if you need anything." I crumpled it up and threw it away. April brought rain to Los Angeles, the kind of steady drizzle that made the city slow down and look inward. I was doing plenty of looking inward myself. Kevin Torres sat across from me at a corner booth in a diner in Glendale, sliding a manila envelope across the table. He was 48, a former LAPD detective who'd gone private after 20 years on the force. Catherine had recommended him with one sentence: "If there's dirt to find, Kevin will find it." "You were right about the Tuesday and Friday pattern," he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "Dylan leaves the office at 5:45 p.m. on those days, drives to the Four Seasons downtown, meets Ashley Morgan in room 1147. He keeps it on permanent reserve under the name Pacific Development, LLC. I opened the envelope. Photographs spilled out. Dylan and Ashley entering the hotel. Dylan and Ashley at a restaurant in Malibu. Dylan and Ashley walking on the beach, his hand on the small of her back. In one photo, they were kissing in the hotel parking garage. Dylan's face was turned toward the camera just enough that there was no denying it was him. I studied the image clinically. This was the man who'd promised to love me for better or worse. The man I'd made breakfast for that very morning. The man who'd asked me to pick up his prescription on my way home from running errands that included meeting with the private investigator documenting his affair. "How long?" I asked. "Based on credit card records, Linda pulled 18 months. But there's more." Kevin pulled out another folder. "The apartment in Century City. He signed the lease 2 years ago, 6 months before Ashley even started working for him." The implication hung in the air. Dylan had planned this. Not just the affair, but the whole escape route. The apartment had been waiting ready for whoever he chose to fill it. "Mrs. Bennett," Kevin said carefully, "I've been doing this work for 15 years. I've seen a lot of cheating spouses, but this is different. Your husband isn't just having an affair. He's been systematically preparing to leave you. And based on what Linda's finding about the offshore accounts, he's been making sure you'd be left with as little as possible. How much has he hidden?" Kevin glanced at his notes. "So far, $1.8 million in the Cayman Islands routed through shell companies. Another $400,000 in a Swiss account under the name of a consulting firm that doesn't actually exist. 2 properties, a condo in San Diego and a commercial building in Phoenix, transferred to companies he controls but you're not listed on." I felt oddly calm. The numbers were so large they'd become abstract, like discussing someone else's life. "What about the business?" "Bennett and Associates is worth approximately $12 million. As a marital asset, you're entitled to half. But here's where it gets interesting." Kevin leaned forward. "Dylan's been moving money out of the business into those shell companies, claiming their consulting fees and strategic investments. It's all bullshit. He's bleeding the business to hide assets from you." "Can we prove it?" "Linda already has. She's got bank statements, wire transfers, emails discussing the transactions. Your husband was careful, but he made one critical mistake." "What?" "He underestimated you." Kevin smiled. "He thought you'd never question anything, that you'd just sign whatever divorce papers he put in front of you and accept whatever scraps he offered. He didn't count on you fighting back." I closed the folder, my hands steady. "What else do you have?" "Text messages. I got access to his phone records, nothing illegal, just subpoenaed through proper channels once we filed the initial discovery motions." He pulled out printed transcripts. "Some of these are explicit, but there's one thread you need to see." He handed me several pages. I scanned them, my coffee growing cold. "Dylan to Ashley, March 15th. Can't wait for this to be over. Just need to get through the next year, then we can be together properly." Ashley to Dylan, I hate sneaking around. I want to be with you for real. Dylan to Ashley soon, baby. Once the divorce is final, Melissa will be out of the picture. She'll get just enough to live on. You and I can start fresh. Ashley to Dylan, promise. I'm not getting any younger, and I don't want to waste my time if you're not serious. Dylan to Ashley, I promise. She's just a phase I need to close. You're my future. I read that last line 3 times. She's just a phase I need to close. 34 years, 2 children, a lifetime of sacrifice and service, reduced to a phase. Mrs. Bennett, Kevin's voice was gentle. You okay? I looked up at him. Do you know what's funny? I'm not even hurt anymore. I'm just done. That's healthy, actually. Anger is more useful than sadness in situations like this. I'm not angry either. And it was true. I felt something colder, sharper. I'm strategic. Kevin grinned. Catherine said you'd get there eventually. She has good instincts about people. That night I cooked Dylan's favorite dinner, grilled salmon with dill sauce, roasted asparagus, wild rice pilaf. He came home at 7, kissed me absently on the cheek, the same cheek he'd kissed before going to meet Ashley at the Four Seasons that afternoon. Smells good, he said, loosening his tie. Long day, I asked, setting his plate in front of him. The usual, client meetings, conference calls. The lies came so easily to him. What did you do today? Oh, you know, grocery shopping errands. I smiled. I picked up your prescription. Thanks, honey. He didn't look up from his phone. I watched him eat the meal I'd prepared, watched him scroll through emails, watched him exist in our home as if I were a piece of furniture. Useful, functional, invisible. Dylan, I said. Do you ever think about the future, our future? He finally looked up, his expression cautious. What do you mean? I don't know. We're getting older. I'm 63. You're 65. I was just wondering, what do you see when you think about the next chapter of our lives? He set down his fork carefully. Why are you asking? No reason, just thinking. I took a sip of wine. Emma's settled in her career. Jacob's doing well. We've done our job as parents. I was just wondering what comes next for us. Dylan's face relaxed. He thought I was being sentimental nostalgic, the stupid devoted wife wondering about growing old together. I think we'll be fine, Melissa. We'll travel more, maybe. Spend time with grandkids when they come. He reached across the table and patted my hand. Don't worry so much. Liar, I thought. In your mind, I'm already gone. You're right, I said aloud. I'm probably just being silly. He smiled and went back to his phone. I cleared the dishes, my hands steady, my mind calculating. Kevin had given me 47 photographs. Linda had traced $2.2 million in hidden assets. Catherine was building a case that would devastate him. I just had to wait. Be patient. Play the role I'd been playing for 34 years. But this time, I was playing it on my terms. May arrived with the jacaranda trees in full bloom, their purple flowers carpeting the sidewalks of Pasadena. I was in the garden deadheading roses when Emma's car pulled into the driveway. She got out slowly, her lawyer's mask slipping just enough that I could see something was wrong. She'd been crying. Emma, I pulled off my gardening gloves. What happened? Can we talk inside? We sat in the kitchen, her at the table where she'd done homework as a child, me making tea because it's what mothers do when they don't know what else to offer. I saw something, Emma said finally. At Dad's office. My hands stilled on the teapot. What did you see? I was dropping off documents for a case. Morrison and Price represents one of Dad's contractors. She took a shaky breath. I needed to use his computer to print something. He was in a meeting and his assistant said it would be fine. I waited. His email was open. I wasn't trying to snoop, Mom, I swear. But there was a message from Ashley. The subject line was, it was explicit. And I clicked on it. She pulled out her phone, hands trembling, and showed me. I read the email thread in silence. Ashley to Dylan. I can't keep doing this. Sneaking around. Lying. When are you going to tell her Dylan to Ashley after my birthday? I promise. Just a few more months. Then it's done. Ashley to Dylan. You said that last year. I'm starting to think you're never going to leave her. Dylan to Ashley, I will. Melissa's not going to make it difficult. She has nothing, no career, no money of her own. She'll take whatever I offer and be grateful. I've already talked to Richard about keeping the settlement small. Ashley to Dylan. I hope you're right. I gave up a lot to be with you. Dylan to Ashley. You won't regret it. Once Melissa's out of the picture, we can start our real life. You, me, the apartment in Century City. Maybe we'll get a place in Malibu, somewhere with a view. Ashley to Dylan. What about Emma and Jacob? Dylan to Ashley. They're adults. They'll understand. And honestly, they've never been that close to Melissa anyway. She's always been more of a, housekeeper than a mother. I handed the phone back to Emma. Her face was pale eyes, red-rimmed. Mom, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I thought you guys were fine. I thought Dad was... Her voice broke. How could he say that about you? How long have you known? I asked quietly. I just found out yesterday. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times She wiped her eyes. All the times I was mean to you. All the times I treated you like you didn't matter. Just like Dad does. I reached across the table and took her hand. Emma, you were modeling what you saw. Children learn how to treat people by watching their parents. You saw your father dismiss me, so you learned to dismiss me too. That's not an excuse. No, but it's an explanation. I squeezed her fingers. Sweetheart, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. If I left your father, whose side would you be on? Emma looked at me for a long moment. I could see the war in her eyes, loyalty to the father who'd paid for Harvard, who'd opened doors in her career, who represented success and stability, versus loyalty to the mother she'd learned to overlook. Yours, she said finally. I'd be on your side. Even if it cost you your relationship with your father. Mom, he called you a housekeeper. He's been planning to leave you for over a year and didn't even have the decency to tell you to your face. He's cheating with a woman younger than me. Her jaw set in a way that reminded me of myself. Yeah, I'd be on your side. I pulled her into a hug. She smelled like expensive perfume and coffee, and the little girl who used to climb into my lap when she had nightmares. There's something you need to know, I said when we finally pulled apart. Your father isn't the only one with secrets. I told her everything. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the evidence Kevin and Linda had compiled, the hidden assets Dylan had been moving for 3 years, the apartment he'd leased for Ashley, the plan to leave me with as little as possible. And then I told her about my father, about the properties, the inheritance, the safety net I'd kept secret for 5 years. Emma's mouth fell open. Grandpa Thomas was a millionaire, almost $6 million with current property values. And Dad doesn't know. No one knows except my lawyers, and now you. I looked at her seriously. Emma, I'm telling you this because I trust you, but also because I need your help. Your father is going to fight dirty when this goes to court. I need to know, can you help me, even if it means going against him? Emma didn't hesitate. What do you need? Information. You work with some of the same contractors Dad uses. You have access to corporate filings, and you know how he thinks. I pulled out a folder Catherine had given me. Linda needs documentation on some of these shell companies. Public records don't show who the real owners are. But if you could... I can get it. Emma took the folder. Morrison and Price has databases for this kind of thing. Corporate transparency searches ownership chains. Give me a week. Emma, if you do this, there's no going back. Your father will see it as betrayal. Good. Her voice was hard. Because that's exactly what it is. He betrayed you. He betrayed this family. And he called you a housekeeper. She stood up. I'm done pretending he's some kind of hero. After she left, I sat in the kitchen for a long time watching the sun set through the window. My daughter, the daughter I thought I'd lost to Dylan's world of ambition and status, had chosen me. It felt like a victory, but I knew it was just the beginning. 2 weeks later, Emma came back with a file 2 inches thick. Holy shit, Mom, she said, spreading documents across my dining room table. Dad's not just hiding money. He's committing fraud. She showed me what she'd found: shell companies that didn't exist on paper, consulting fees paid to fake businesses, properties titled under names of people who weren't real. This one, she pointed to a company called Westside Holdings Group, is supposedly owned by someone named Marcus Chen, except there's no Marcus Chen. The address listed is a UPS store. The phone number goes to a disconnected line, but the company owns a $2.3 million property in San Diego. How did you find this? Corporate database searches, cross-referenced with property records and business registrations. She pulled out more papers. And this is the really damning part. I found email chains where Dad discusses these companies with his accountant. He knows they're fake. He set them up specifically to hide assets. I stared at the evidence. This wasn't just infidelity. This wasn't just planning to leave me. This was calculated systematic fraud. Emma, this could destroy his business. I know. She met my eyes. Do you want me to give it to your lawyers? I thought about Dylan. About 34 years of cooking his meals and organizing his life and making myself small so he could be big. About him calling me a housekeeper. About him planning to leave me with just enough to live on. Yes, I said. Give it to Catherine. Emma nodded and pulled out her phone. There's one more thing. Jacob. My heart sank. What about Jacob? He doesn't know about any of this. He still thinks Dad walks on water. She hesitated. Mom, he needs to know the truth, but it has to come from you. He won't believe me. Maybe not at first, but he deserves to know who his father really is. June was brutal. Not the weather California was having a mild summer, but the emotional toll of living a double life. Every morning I woke up next to a man I was preparing to destroy in court. Every evening I cooked dinner for someone who was planning to discard me like trash. And every night I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd spent 34 years of my life so blind. But I wasn't blind anymore. Linda Wu came to see me on a Tuesday afternoon when Dylan was safely at the office. She brought her laptop and a grim expression. I finished the forensic analysis, she said, setting up at my kitchen table. Melissa, sit down. I sat. Your husband has hidden $2.4 million in offshore accounts. He's transferred ownership of properties worth another $3.1 million to shell companies he controls. He's been systematically bleeding money out of Bennett and Associates to the tune of $850,000 over 3 years. The numbers made my head spin. How is that even possible? Easy. He owns the company. He can move money however he wants as long as he makes it look legitimate. Consulting fees, strategic investments, business development costs. It all sounds reasonable on paper, except none of it's real. She showed me spreadsheet after spreadsheet. Each one told the same story. Dylan had been preparing for this divorce for at least 3 years, maybe longer. There's more, Linda said. I traced the payment to Ashley's apartment. That's coming out of a business account, which means he's been using marital assets money you have a claim to fund his affair. Can we use that? Oh, absolutely. In California, using community property to support an extramarital affair is a big deal. The court doesn't like it. She smiled grimly. But here's the real kicker. I found evidence he's been planning to fire several long-term employees right before they qualify for full retirement benefits. The money he saves goes straight into his pocket. I felt sick. Why would he do that? Greed, control, because he can. Linda closed her laptop. Melissa, your husband isn't just a cheater. He's a bad person, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. Catherine Park called me into her office the following week. She looked like a cat who'd caught a particularly fat mouse. We have everything we need, she announced. Kevin's photographs, Linda's financial analysis, Emma's corporate records, text messages, emails, bank statements. It's ironclad. What happens now? Now we wait for the right moment. She leaned back in her chair. Dylan's 65th birthday is in 2 months. Based on his texts with Ashley, that's when he's planning to ask for a divorce. We're going to let him do it. What? Think about it, Melissa. If you file first, he'll claim you were irrational, emotional, unstable. But if he asks for the divorce, if he's the one who wants out, then we get to reveal everything. His affair, his hidden assets, his fraud. And we do it in open court where it becomes public record. His business partners will see it. Exactly. Bennett and Associates will distance themselves from him so fast it'll make his head spin. His reputation will be destroyed. And more importantly, the judge will see him for what he is, a man who tried to cheat his wife out of her fair share. I thought about it. What about Emma and Jacob? They need to know the truth before we file, both of them. Because once this goes public, Dylan is going to paint you as the villain. He'll tell everyone you're bitter, vindictive, trying to destroy him out of spite. Your children need to know the truth first. Jacob still doesn't know any of this. Catherine nodded. Then it's time to tell him. I called Jacob on a Thursday evening. Can you come over for dinner this Sunday, just you and me? Your father has a golf tournament. Sure, Mom. Everything okay? Everything's fine. I just want to spend some time with my son. He arrived at noon casual in jeans and a polo shirt. At 29, he looked so much like a younger Dylan it hurt. The same confident walk, the same easy smile. Hey, Mom, he kissed my cheek. Something smells amazing. Your favorite, pot roast with vegetables. We made small talk through lunch. His work at Bennett & Associates, he'd just been promoted. His girlfriend, Sarah, a marketing executive he'd been dating for 6 months. His plans to buy a condo in Silver Lake. Dad's been talking about making me a partner, he said, pride evident in his voice. Within the next year or two if I keep performing well. That's wonderful, sweetheart. Yeah, I mean, I know some people think I only got where I am because I'm his son, but I work hard, I've earned it. I set down my fork. Jacob, there's something I need to tell you, and I need you to listen with an open mind. His smile faded. What's wrong? Your father is having an affair. The color drained from his face. What number, Mom? That's Dad wouldn't. With Ashley Morgan, his assistant. It's been going on for 18 months. I pulled out my phone and showed him one of Kevin's photographs. Dylan and Ashley kissing in the hotel parking garage. Jacob stared at the image. His hands started shaking. There's more, I said quietly. Your father has been hiding money. Millions of dollars. In offshore accounts, shell companies, fake businesses. He's been planning to divorce me for at least 3 years, and he's been making sure I'd be left with as little as possible. I can't. Jacob looked up at me, his eyes desperate. Mom, why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know the truth. And because when this goes to court, and it will go to court, your father is going to try to turn you against me. He's going to say I'm lying, that I'm bitter, that I'm trying to destroy him. I need you to know the facts first. I showed him everything. The bank statements Linda had compiled, the emails Emma had found, the text messages between Dylan and Ashley, the evidence of fraud, of planned employee terminations, of systematic deception. By the time I finished, Jacob was crying. He told me, his voice broke. He told me you were going through menopause, that you were being emotional and irrational, that I should be patient with you because older women get confused sometimes. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. He said that, yeah, last month when you forgot to pick up his suits. Jacob wiped his eyes. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have questioned it. I should have known better. You trusted your father. That's normal. No. He stood up, pacing. No, it's not normal. I've been working for him for 5 years. I've seen how he treats people. Employees, clients, even you. I didn't want to see it. He turned to face me. What are you going to do? I'm going to divorce him, and I'm going to make sure I get what I'm owed. Good. His jaw set in a way that reminded me of Emma. What can I do to help? The next day, Jacob didn't show up for work. Dylan called me at lunch, irritated. Have you heard from Jacob? He's not answering his phone and we have a client meeting at 2. No, I haven't. It wasn't quite a lie. Jacob had texted me, but I hadn't heard his voice. If he calls, tell him to get his ass to the office. Click. I looked at Jacob's text again. I can't look at him right now. Took a personal day. Need to think. An hour later, my phone rang. Jacob. Mom, I'm at Dad's office building. Waited for him in the parking garage. His voice was tight. I just watched him and Ashley walk out together. She had her hand on his arm. They were laughing. Mom, they looked... I know, sweetheart. They looked like a couple, like they belonged together. And Dad saw me. He saw me watching him. What did he do? Told Ashley to wait in the car, then he walked over like nothing was wrong. I heard background noise, traffic voices. He said, Jacob, what are you doing here? Jacob's voice was shaking, like I was the one in the wrong. So I said, I know about Ashley. I know about the affair. What did he say? He didn't even try to deny it, Mom. He got this look on his face, cold, calculating. And he said, son, you need to understand. Your mother and I, our marriage has been over for a long time. I've just been waiting for the right moment to make it official. Ashley makes me happy. Your mother hasn't made me happy in years. I closed my eyes, absorbing the pain on my son's behalf. I told him I'd seen the bank records, the offshore accounts, the shell companies, everything. Jacob took a shaky breath. You know what he said? That's smart business, Jacob. That's how you protect your assets. Your mother wouldn't understand because she's never worked a day in her life. She's contributed nothing to this family except being a burden I've had to carry. Mom, I lost it. Jacob's voice broke. I told him that wasn't true, that you raised us while he was building his career, that you sacrificed your education, your dreams, everything for this family, that you made him look good at every dinner party and charity event for 34 years. What did he say? He laughed. Jacob sounded incredulous. He actually laughed. He said, "Is that what she told you, Jacob? Your mother was barely scraping by when I met her. Her father was a house painter. She had no prospects, no future. I gave her a life she never could have had on her own, and now she's trying to play victim because I want to be happy." That's when I said it. Jacob's voice got very quiet. I said, "You're wrong, Dad. Grandpa Thomas left Mom almost $6 million in property. She's been sitting on it for 5 years just watching you, watching who you really are. And you know what? You failed the test." My heart stopped. "Jacob, you weren't supposed to." "I know. I'm sorry. I was so angry. It came out." He paused. "You should have seen his face, Mom. He went white, then red. Then he grabbed my arm hard and said, 'What did you just say? What did you do?' I pulled away from him. I told him I quit, that I wasn't going to work for a man who treats people like disposable tools, that I wasn't going to be his partner in fraud." Jacob's voice strengthened. "And then I told him that when you take him to court, I'm going to testify. I'm going to tell the judge everything I've seen, everything I know." "Oh, Jacob, he threatened me, Mom. He said if I testified against him, he'd cut me off completely. No money, no inheritance, no family. He said I was choosing sides and I'd better be sure I wanted to be on yours." "And what did you say?" "I said I'd already chosen. I chose my mother, the one who actually loved me instead of just using me." He was crying again. "I'm so sorry, Mom, for all the years I didn't see it, for all the times I took his side without even asking for yours." "Sweetheart, you have nothing to apologize for." "Yes, I do, but I'm going to make it right." His voice hardened. "I'm going to help you destroy him." That night, Dylan came home late. He slammed through the door, his face red with fury. "Melissa," I came out of the kitchen wiping my hands on a dish towel, playing my part one last time. "Dylan, what's wrong?" "What's wrong?" He advanced on me. "What's wrong is that my son just quit, told me I'm a fraud and a liar, said he's going to testify against me in court, in a divorce I haven't even filed for yet." I kept my expression neutral. "I don't understand. Don't play dumb." He was inches from my face now. I could smell bourbon on his breath. "Jacob said you have money. $6 million from your father. Is that true?" "Yes." The word hung between us. "How long have you known?" His voice was dangerously quiet. 5 years. Since Daddy died. 5 years. He stepped back. "You've been sitting on $6 million for 5 years and you never told me." "It's my inheritance. My separate property. It had nothing to do with you." "Nothing to do with me. I'm your husband." "Are you?" I met his eyes. "Because 18 months ago, you started sleeping with Ashley. 3 years ago, you started hiding money in the Cayman Islands. And according to the text messages I've read, you've been planning to leave me for over a year. You were just waiting for the right time." Dylan's face went from red to white. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting myself from a man who calls me a burden, who tells his mistress I'll be out of the picture soon, who refers to me as a housekeeper instead of his wife. You don't understand. I understand perfectly." I took off my apron, folded it carefully, and set it on the counter. "I understand that you never loved me. You loved the idea of me, the supportive wife who made you look good. But you never saw me as a person. You never asked what I wanted or what I dreamed about. You just assumed I'd always be here, grateful and invisible. Melissa, I'm filing for divorce, Dylan, and I'm taking everything I'm owed. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the properties you've been hiding. All of it." I picked up my purse. "I'm staying at a hotel tonight. My lawyer will be in touch." "You can't do this." His voice rose. "I'll fight you. I'll prove you're unstable, irrational. You can try." I headed for the door. "But I have bank statements, photographs, text messages, emails, and 2 eyewitnesses willing to testify about your affair and your fraud. So ask yourself, do you really want this to go public? Do you want all your business partners and clients to know what kind of man you really are?" I opened the door. turned back to look at him one last time. You were right about one thing, Dylan. I was barely scraping by when we met. My father was just a house painter, and you gave me a life I never could have had on my own. I smiled. But what you never understood is that I didn't need your life. I needed mine, and I'm taking it back. I walked out, leaving him standing in our kitchen in the house I'd turned into a home surrounded by everything I'd built, and I didn't look back. The Los Angeles Superior Court building loomed gray and imposing under an August sky. I stood on the steps, smoothing down the navy suit Catherine had helped me pick out different from the navy dress I'd worn for 34 years. This one had sharp lines of fitted waist authority. I'd cut my hair, too, into a sleek bob that framed my face. At 63, I looked like a woman who knew her worth. Ready, Catherine stood beside me, her briefcase in hand, Emma and Jacob flanking my other side. Ready, I said. We walked through the metal detectors, past the marble columns into courtroom 4B. Dylan was already there, sitting with Richard Blackwell, his attorney, a silver-haired man in a $3,000 suit who specialized in protecting wealthy men from their wives. Dylan looked terrible. He'd lost weight, his suit hanging loose on his frame. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his hair, always so carefully styled, looked unwashed. When he saw me, something flickered in his expression. Not quite regret. More like shock that I was real, that this was actually happening. Ashley sat in the gallery wearing a black dress that was too tight and too young for a courtroom. She watched Dylan with desperate eyes, like a woman beginning to realize she'd bet on the wrong horse. Judge Patricia Morrison entered, and we all stood. She was 58, African-American, with a reputation for being tough on financial fraud. Catherine had been thrilled when we'd drawn her. Be seated, Judge Morrison said. I've reviewed the preliminary filings in Bennett v. Bennett. This appears to be a contested divorce with significant financial components. Mr. Blackwell, you may present your opening statement. Richard Blackwell stood, buttoning his jacket. Thank you, Your Honor. This is a straightforward case. My client, Dylan Bennett, built a successful architectural firm over 35 years through hard work and talent. Mrs. Bennett, while a devoted homemaker, made no financial contributions to the marriage. Mr. Bennett is prepared to offer generous spousal support of $3,000 per month for 5 years, which is more than adequate for objection. Catherine was on her feet. Counsel is misrepresenting the facts. Mrs. Bennett made substantial contributions to the marriage, both financial and otherwise, which we will demonstrate. Additionally, Mr. Bennett has engaged in fraudulent transfer of assets with the intent to deprive Mrs. Bennett of her community property rights. Judge Morrison raised an eyebrow. That's a serious allegation, Ms. Park. We have extensive documentation, Your Honor. I look forward to seeing it. Continue, Mr. Blackwell. For the next 20 minutes, Blackwell painted a picture of Dylan as a self-made man, burdened by a wife who'd contributed nothing. I sat still, my hands folded, while he reduced 34 years of my life to domestic duties and social entertaining. Then Catherine stood. Your Honor, members of the court, she began, her voice clear and strong. This case is not about a marriage that simply didn't work out. This is about systematic fraud, deliberate deception, and a man who spent 3 years carefully dismantling his wife's financial security while planning to abandon her with as little as possible. She clicked a remote. A screen lowered behind her. Dylan Bennett didn't just fall out of love with his wife. He entered into an extramarital affair 18 months ago with his assistant Ashley Morgan. The first photograph appeared Dylan and Ashley kissing in the hotel parking garage. He used marital assets money Mrs. Bennett had a legal claim to rent Ms. Morgan a luxury apartment at $3,500 per month. More photographs. Dylan and Ashley at restaurants, entering the Four Seasons, walking on the beach. Dylan's face turned red. Ashley in the gallery looked like she wanted to disappear. But the affair is just the beginning, Catherine continued. Over the past 3 years, Mr. Bennett has systematically hidden assets from his wife. He transferred $2.4 million to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands using shell companies. Bank statements appeared on the screen, wire transfer records, corporate filings. He moved ownership of properties worth $3.1 million into fake businesses. More documents scrolled past. He bled his own company of $850,000, disguising it as consulting fees and strategic investments, none of which actually existed. Catherine turned to face Dylan. Mr. Bennett planned this divorce carefully. He just made one critical error. He underestimated his wife. The first witness Catherine called was Linda Wu. Linda took the stand with the calm authority of someone who'd testified in federal fraud cases. She outlined every hidden account, every shell company, every fraudulent transfer, presenting it with damning clarity. In my 15 years as a forensic accountant, Linda said, I've rarely seen such systematic fraud. Mr. Bennett created 5 separate shell companies: Pacific Development, LLC, Westside Holdings Group, Summit Consulting Partners, Coastal Property Management, and Vista Strategic Investments. None of these companies have actual employees, actual offices, or actual business operations. They exist solely to hold assets that should be community property. How much money are we talking about? Catherine asked. In total, $5.3 million in hidden or fraudulently transferred assets. A murmur went through the courtroom. Dylan leaned over to whisper something urgent to Blackwell. On cross-examination, Blackwell tried to paint the transfers as legitimate business decisions, but Linda demolished every argument with spreadsheets and bank records. Next, Catherine called Kevin Torres. The private investigator presented the timeline of Dylan's affair with military precision. Dates, times, locations, the permanent hotel room reservation, the credit card charges, the text messages. Did Mr. Bennett take any steps to hide the affair? Catherine asked. Yes. He used a separate credit card, one Mrs. Bennett didn't know about, for most expenses related to Ms. Morgan. He met her on specific days when he told his wife he had business meetings. He instructed Ms. Morgan to park in a different garage when visiting his office. These sound like the actions of someone who knew he was doing something wrong. Objection calls for speculation, Blackwell said. Sustained. I'll rephrase, Catherine said smoothly. Mr. Torres, in your professional experience, do people engaged in innocent business relationships typically hide those relationships from their spouses? No, ma'am, they don't. Then came Emma. My daughter walked to the witness stand in her lawyer's suit, her face composed but her hands trembling slightly. Dylan stared at her with an expression of betrayal that would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. Ms. Bennett, Catherine began gently, please state your relationship to the plaintiff and defendant. I'm their daughter. Melissa Bennett is my mother. Dylan Bennett is my father. And you work as an attorney at Morrison & Price? Yes. In the course of your work, did you come across information relevant to this case? Emma took a deep breath. Yes. I was using my father's computer at his office to print documents for a case. His email was open. I saw a message from Ashley Morgan with a subject line that was inappropriate. I opened it. What did the email say? Emma pulled out a printed copy, her hands steady now. Ashley was asking when my father would tell her, meaning my mother. My father responded that it would be after his 65th birthday. He said, and I quote, Melissa's not going to make it difficult. She has nothing, no career, no money of her own. She'll take whatever I offer and be grateful. The courtroom was silent. He also said, Emma's voice caught. She cleared her throat. He said my mother had been more of a housekeeper than a mother. I watched Dylan flinch. Ms. Bennett, how did that make you feel? Objection relevance, Blackwell said. Your Honor, it speaks to Mr. Bennett's character and his attitude toward his wife, Catherine argued. I'll allow it. Answer the question, Ms. Bennett. Emma looked directly at Dylan. It made me realize I'd been complicit in my father's cruelty. For years, I'd dismissed my mother's contributions because I'd learned from watching my father that her work had no value. I was wrong. And I'm here to testify because she deserves better. Blackwell tried to discredit Emma on cross-examination, suggesting she was biased, that she was taking her mother's side in a family dispute. Emma didn't waver. I'm taking the side of truth, she said simply. My father committed fraud. I'm an officer of the court. I have an obligation to be honest. Then Jacob took the stand. My son had aged in the past 3 months. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. But he sat straight, his voice clear. Mr. Bennett, Catherine said, you worked for your father's company for 5 years, correct? Yes. In that time, did you observe his treatment of your mother? Yes. He was dismissive, condescending. He'd tell me she was going through menopause when she forgot things like she was mentally deficient. He'd make jokes about her with his business partners. He once told me, your mother's fine for cooking and hosting parties, but don't expect her to understand real business. Did there come a time when you confronted your father about his affair? Jacob described the parking garage confrontation in detail. When he got to the part where Dylan had called me a burden he'd had to carry, I saw several people in the gallery shake their heads. Your father threatened to cut you off if you testified today, didn't he? Catherine asked. Yes. Why are you here? Jacob looked at me. Because my mother sacrificed 34 years of her life for our family. She deserves justice, and I'd rather lose my inheritance than lose my integrity. Blackwell's cross-examination was vicious. He accused Jacob of being influenced by me of having ulterior motives of lying to get a larger inheritance. Your mother has $6 million in property, Blackwell said. Isn't it true you're testifying to get access to that money? No, Jacob said calmly. I'm testifying because it's the right thing to do. And for the record, my mother told me about her inheritance before I knew about my father's fraud. I didn't help her to get money. I helped her because she's my mother and she was being victimized by my father. Finally, Catherine called me. I walked to the witness stand on legs that trembled only slightly. The bailiff swore me in. I sat down, looked at Catherine, and waited. Mrs. Bennett, she said, how long were you married to Dylan Bennett? 34 years. Tell the court about the early years of your marriage. I did. I told them about dropping out of USC 3 credits shy of my business degree, about being pregnant with Emma, about Dylan's promise to take care of me, to make me his queen. In those 34 years, did you work outside the home? No. Dylan said it wasn't necessary, that his career would support us both. What did you do instead? I raised our children. I managed our household. I organized business dinners and charity events that helped Dylan's career. I typed his proposals before he could afford administrative staff. I was his unpaid assistant, his hostess, his support system. I looked at the judge. I made his success possible. Mrs. Bennett, at any point in these 34 years, did your husband express appreciation for these contributions? I thought about it honestly. In the beginning, yes. He'd thank me, tell me he couldn't do it without me. But over time, I became invisible, expected, taken for granted. When did you first learn about your father's properties? 5 years ago after he died. His lawyer sent me a letter. Why didn't you tell your husband I pulled out my father's letter and read it aloud. When I got to the part about watching what kind of man Dylan really was, I saw Judge Morrison lean forward. Your father wanted you to observe your husband's character, Catherine said. What did you observe? That my father was right. Dylan never asked if I needed anything, never wondered if I had resources of my own. He just assumed I was completely dependent on him. And when I overheard him planning to divorce me, planning to leave me with just enough to live on, Mrs. Bennett, Catherine said, do you still own these properties? Yes, all of them. What are they worth today? According to the most recent appraisals, $5.7 million. The number echoed through the courtroom. Dylan's face went white. Your Honor, Catherine said, I'd like to enter into evidence the complete property records for Thomas Wright's estate. These properties were inherited by Mrs. Bennett and are her separate property under California law. They were never community property, and Mr. Bennett has no claim to them. She paused for effect. Which is important because these properties prove that Mrs. Bennett was never financially dependent on Mr. Bennett. She chose to stay in the marriage. She chose to continue supporting him, building his business, raising their children, not because she had no other options, but because she believed in their partnership. Catherine turned to face Dylan. Mr. Bennett didn't know about these properties because he never asked. He never cared enough about his wife as a person to wonder about her family, her inheritance, her financial situation. He simply assumed she had nothing and would always have nothing, and that assumption led him to commit fraud, believing he could hide assets, and she'd never have the resources to fight back. Catherine walked back to our table and picked up one more document. But Mrs. Bennett did have resources. She hired a forensic accountant, a private investigator, and a legal team. And we have documented every crime Mr. Bennett committed against his wife and his business partners. She handed the document to the bailiff, who passed it to Judge Morrison. This is a criminal referral, Catherine said. We are requesting that evidence of Mr. Bennett's financial fraud be forwarded to the district attorney's office for potential prosecution. Because this isn't just a divorce case, Your Honor. This is a pattern of criminal behavior. Judge Morrison called a recess. We sat in a conference room while she reviewed the evidence. Catherine was cautiously optimistic. Emma held my hand. Jacob paced. Mom, Emma said quietly, whatever happens, I'm proud of you. We both are, Jacob added. 2 hours later, we were called back into the courtroom. Judge Morrison looked severe. I've reviewed the evidence presented in this case, and I want to be very clear. This is one of the most egregious cases of financial fraud I've seen in my 20 years on the bench. Dylan's shoulders slumped. Mr. Bennett, the judge said, addressing him directly, you systematically hid assets from your wife with the clear intent to deprive her of her community property rights. You used marital assets to support an extramarital affair. You committed fraud against your own business. And you did all of this while your wife was serving as your unpaid assistant, raising your children and building the social capital that helped your business succeed. She looked down at her notes. California law is clear. Community property must be divided equally. However, when one spouse has engaged in fraudulent transfer of assets, the court has the discretion to award more than 50% to the victimized spouse. My heart pounded. Additionally, Family Code Section 1101 provides for damages when one spouse breaches their fiduciary duty to the other. Mr. Bennett, you breached that duty in every possible way. She announced her ruling financial settlement Melissa to receive $3. $2,050,000 of community property plus damages for hidden assets. Dylan to return all offshore funds or face contempt charges. Properties and shell companies to be sold. Proceeds divided with 70% to Melissa. Dylan to pay Melissa's legal fees, $180,000, spousal support, $8,500 per month for life. Reviewable if Melissa remarries, but she could waive this separate property. Melissa's $5.7 million inheritance confirmed as separate property. No claim by Dylan Business. Bennett and Associates to be audited for additional hidden assets. If fraud discovered, Dylan to face additional penalties. Additional orders. Evidence forwarded to District Attorney for potential criminal prosecution. Dylan prohibited from liquidating any business assets pending audit. The total was staggering. When everything was added up, I would have approximately $9 million plus ongoing support. Dylan stood shakily. Your Honor, you should have thought about that before you committed fraud, Mr. Bennett. Judge Morrison's voice was ice. You are fortunate your wife is only pursuing civil remedies. The criminal charges could send you to prison. She banged her gavel. This court is adjourned. The aftermath unfolded over the next 3 months. Dylan's business partners held an emergency meeting 2 days after the trial. The details of his fraud had become public record picked up by the Los Angeles Times business section. Prominent architect caught hiding millions in divorce case, read the headline. Bennett and Associates board voted unanimously to remove Dylan as CEO. His partnership was bought out at a severely reduced price. 3 major clients canceled contracts worth $8 million. The company eventually rebranded as Bennett and Partners, removing Dylan's name entirely. Ashley Morgan left him 3 weeks after the trial. I heard through Sarah, who heard through the gossip mill, that she'd sent him a text. You promised me a life. You're broke and toxic. I'm done wasting my youth. Dylan moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Burbank. His lifestyle, once supported by hidden millions, collapsed. The Porsche was sold. The country club membership canceled. The twice-weekly personal trainer gone. Jacob told me that Dylan had tried to call him once. What did he say? I asked. He said I'd destroyed him, that I'd chosen you over him, and now I'd have to live with the consequences. Jacob shook his head. I told him I could live with my choices just fine. Then I hung up. Emma never spoke to Dylan again. He made his choices, she said when I asked if she felt guilty. I've made mine. As for me, I had one last conversation with Dylan. He called on a Tuesday evening in November. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Melissa, his voice was hoarse older. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I sat down on my couch in my new apartment in Santa Monica with a view of the ocean furnished with pieces I'd chosen because I liked them, not because they impressed anyone. Okay, I said. That's it. Just okay. What do you want me to say, Dylan? That I forgive you? That we can be friends? I looked out at the sunset painting the sky pink and gold. I don't forgive you. You don't deserve my forgiveness. But I don't hate you either. I just don't think about you much anymore. Melissa, I made mistakes, but we had good years. No, my voice was firm. We had years where I made your life good. I cooked your meals, raised your children, organized your world. You had a servant who also warmed your bed. That's not the same thing as a marriage. I loved you. You loved what I did for you. You never loved who I was. I stood up, walking to the window. Dylan, I'm 63 years old. I spent 34 years being Mrs. Dylan Bennett. I'm not going to spend whatever time I have left being bitter about it. I'm just going to live. Can I see you just to talk? No. Goodbye, Dylan. I hung up, blocked his number, and felt nothing but relief. On a cold morning in January, I walked across the University of Southern California campus for the first time in 35 years. The MBA program for executives met on weekends and evenings. At 63, I was the oldest student in my cohort by 20 years. The first week, a 28-year-old named Marcus asked if I was someone's mother sitting in on the class. No, I said pleasantly. I'm Melissa Wright. I'm here to finish what I started in 1990. Professor Chen had us go around introducing ourselves. The young professionals talked about their career goals, their companies, their ambitions. When it was my turn, I stood up. I'm Melissa. I dropped out of this university 35 years ago, 3 credits short of my business degree because I got pregnant, and my boyfriend, my husband, convinced me his education was more important than mine. I spent the next 34 years making him successful. Now I'm here to finish my degree and figure out who I am when I'm not defined by someone else. The room was silent. Then Professor Chen started clapping. The rest of the class joined in. After class, 3 women in their 40s and 50s approached me. I'm going through a divorce, one said. Your story. Thank you. I gave up my career for my husband's, another added. I'm trying to figure out how to go back. Hearing you say you're doing it at 63, it gives me hope. I exchanged phone numbers with them. We started meeting for coffee. Before long, we'd formed a support group, women who were rebuilding their lives after losing themselves in someone else's dreams. Emma and I had lunch every Sunday at a restaurant in Pasadena. She'd just made junior partner at Morrison & Price. I've been thinking, she said over salads one afternoon, about getting engaged. To Mark, her boyfriend of 2 years, a kind environmental lawyer who made her laugh. Yeah, but Mom, I'm scared. What if I end up like you and Dad? I reached across the table and took her hand. Emma, you won't. Do you know why? Why? Because you're asking the question. Because you see me not as a cautionary tale, but as a person who had agency and made choices. I squeezed her fingers. I don't regret marrying your father. I regret not demanding to be treated as an equal partner. I regret making myself small, but I don't regret you or Jacob or the life I built. How do I make sure I don't disappear? You don't give up your name. You don't give up your career. You don't let anyone tell you their dreams matter more than yours. I smiled. And you marry someone who sees you as a partner, not a supporting character. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Mark does see me that way. Then say yes, but on your terms. 6 months later, I watched Emma marry Mark in a beautiful ceremony in Santa Barbara. She wore her grandmother's pearls, the ones my mother had left me, and she kept her own name. During the reception, she gave a toast. To my mother, she said, raising her glass, who taught me that it's never too late to reclaim yourself, who showed me that loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself, and who proved that at 63, you can still be the hero of your own story. I cried. Jacob cried. Even Sarah, my maid of honor, cried. Jacob opened his architectural firm in the spring, Wright & Associates, named after my father. Grandpa Thomas built things that lasted, Jacob explained when I asked about the name. Houses people actually lived in. I want to do that too. Build things for real people, not just rich clients who want status symbols. I invested $200,000 in his firm, not as a gift, but as a proper investment with contracts and terms and quarterly reviews. Mom, Jacob protested, you don't have to do this formally. I'm your son. Which is exactly why we're doing it formally, I said. I'm teaching you that women's money is real money, that when I invest, I expect returns and accountability, that I'm not just your mother, I'm a businesswoman. He got it. His first project was converting one of my father's old properties into affordable housing. The Wright Building, the plaque read, in memory of Thomas Wright, who believed in building futures, not just buildings. I traveled. Paris in the spring, where I walked along the Seine and ate croissants, and visited the Louvre without anyone telling me we needed to leave for a business meeting. Japan in the fall, where I learned about tea ceremonies and stayed in a ryokan and discovered I loved the structure and ritual of it all. I took a watercolor class. I was terrible at it, but I didn't care. I painted ugly flowers and crooked buildings and gave them to Emma and Jacob, who hung them in their homes like they were masterpieces. I joined a book club. All women over 50, all with stories like mine, husbands who'd left them careers they'd abandoned, selves they were rediscovering. I started writing. Not a memoir exactly, but essays about marriage, sacrifice, identity, worth. A blog called Reclaiming Melissa that attracted 50,000 followers in 6 months. Women who saw themselves in my story, who were tired of being invisible, who were ready to demand more. One essay went viral, the 34-year experiment. I spent 34 years trying to be the perfect wife I wrote. I thought if I was perfect enough, cooked the right meals, wore the right clothes, said the right things, made myself small enough, I would be loved. But here's what I learned. You cannot shrink yourself into someone's affection. You cannot earn love through self-erasure. The only person whose love you need is your own. At 63, I'm learning to love myself. Not because I'm perfect, but because I'm enough. Because I always was enough, and I just forgot. If you're reading this and you've forgotten too, this is your reminder: you are not a supporting character in someone else's story. You are the protagonist of your own. The essay was shared 200,000 times. Women messaged me from around the world. One wrote, "I'm 58, and I just filed for divorce after 30 years. Your story gave me courage." Another, "I'm 25 and watching my mother disappear into my father's shadow. I sent her your blog. Thank you for showing us another way." On a Sunday morning in June, I drove to Alhambra, to my father's old house, the one I'd sold 5 years ago in a grief-stricken haze while Dylan handled the paperwork. The new owners had painted it blue. My father would have liked that. I sat in my car, a new Tesla I'd bought because I wanted it, not because anyone told me it was practical, and thought about him. Thomas Wright, the house painter with paint-stained hands and a heart that knew how to build futures. "I'm sorry I was ashamed of you, Daddy," I whispered. "I'm sorry I thought your work wasn't important enough. I understand now. You built things that mattered. You built me a safety net. You built me a second chance." I pulled out my phone and called Emma. "Mom, everything okay?" "Everything's perfect. I just wanted to tell you I love you." "I love you too. Where are you?" "At Grandpa Thomas's house, thinking about how he spent 50 years building my future, and I didn't even know it." "He'd be proud of you, Mom. You know that, right?" "I hope so." "I know so. You took what he gave you, and you built something even bigger. You built yourself." After we hung up, I sat there a while longer watching a young family come out of the house. A mother, father, 2 small children. The mother was carrying a toddler, laughing at something the father said. They looked happy. Equal. Like partners. I hope they make it, I thought. I hope she never has to choose between herself and her family. I hope he sees her as a person, not a service. I drove home to my Santa Monica apartment, stopping at the farmer's market for fresh flowers. I arranged them in a vase badly because I still wasn't good at it, and set them on my kitchen table. My phone buzzed. "Sarah, dinner tonight, new Thai place just opened." "Yes, 7 p.m., perfect. Bring your appetite and your stories." I smiled. I had plenty of stories now. I was writing new ones every day. That evening, over pad thai and spring rolls, Sarah raised her glass of wine. "To Melissa Wright," she said, "the woman who came back." "I never left," I corrected. "I was just hiding." "Well, you're not hiding anymore." Sarah clinked her glass against mine. "So what's next? Another degree, a business, a book deal?" "I don't know," I said honestly. And that's the beautiful part. For 34 years, I knew exactly what came next. Dylan's breakfast, Dylan's schedule, Dylan's needs. Now I get to decide. And some days I'll decide to do nothing at all except sit by the ocean and read a book. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything. We ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then Sarah asked, "Do you ever regret it? The marriage, I mean, knowing how it ended." I thought about it carefully. I regret the years I let him define my worth. I regret not finishing my degree in 1990. I regret being ashamed of my father. I took a sip of wine. But I don't regret Emma and Jacob. I don't regret learning what I'm capable of. And I don't regret discovering at 63 that I'm stronger than I ever knew. What would you tell your younger self, the 29-year-old standing on those courthouse steps? I smiled. I'd tell her, finish your degree. Don't give up your name. Don't make yourself small for anyone's comfort. And remember, you are Melissa Wright, not Mrs. Anybody. Just Melissa, and that's enough. Sarah's eyes glistened. It's more than enough. It always was. I stood in front of my business class, heart pounding, ready to present my capstone project. At 64, I was about to graduate with my MBA, the degree I'd started 36 years ago, the dream I'd put on hold for someone else's dreams. My project was about women's unpaid labor in the home, quantifying the economic value of housework, childcare, social networking, and emotional labor. I'd calculated that over 34 years, my contributions had been worth $5. $2 million, not counting the social capital I'd built that had directly benefited Dylan's business. The question isn't whether housewives contribute to the economy, I concluded. The question is why we pretend they don't. Why we call it not working when someone manages a household, raises children, and supports a partner's career. This work has value. The women doing it have value. And it's time we stopped treating us as if we're just footnotes in someone else's success story. The class erupted in applause. Professor Chen stood clapping hardest of all. Later, she pulled me aside. Have you considered publishing this? It's groundbreaking work, Melissa. I'm already in talks with a publisher, I said. It's going to be a book. The Hidden Economy Valuing Women's Unpaid Labor. It comes out next spring. I'll be first in line to buy it. Graduation was in June. Emma, Jacob, Mark, and Sarah sat in the audience. Emma held up a sign that said, "That's my mom." Jacob whistled when they called my name. I walked across the stage in my cap and gown, shook hands with the dean, and accepted my diploma. Melissa Wright, MBA, not Mrs. Dylan Bennett, just Melissa. And for the first time in 34 years, I felt complete. That night alone in my apartment, I pulled out my father's letter one more time. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. It ended. Always have been. Don't let anyone make you forget who you are. I won't, Daddy, I whispered. Not ever again. I put the letter away and opened my laptop. I had an essay to write for my blog. The title was already forming in my mind. What I learned when I stopped being a wife and started being myself. I began typing. At 64, I'm finally living the life I was supposed to have at 29. Some people would call that a tragedy, all those lost years. But I call it a triumph. Because I didn't just survive those years. I learned from them. I grew from them. And I emerged from them as someone stronger, wiser, and more certain of her worth than that 29-year-old ever could have been. You're never too old to start over. You're never too late to reclaim yourself. You're never too invisible to be seen. You just have to learn to see yourself first. I am Melissa Wright. I am 64 years old. I have an MBA, a book deal, 2 children I adore, and a future that belongs entirely to me. And I'm just getting started. I hit publish. Within an hour, the essay had 1,000 shares. By morning, 10,000. Women messaging me from around the world. Thank you. I needed this. You've changed my life. But they had it wrong. I hadn't changed their lives. I just reminded them of what they'd always known deep down, even when the world tried to make them forget they were enough. They had always been enough, and they deserved to live like it.